Okay, well, hello everyone. And this is a video for the acrylic class members that use acrylic for the tulip class. And I thought I'd just do a single tulip just to demonstrate how, you would blend the red and the white together using acrylic. So I'm gonna just start off with, I'm using this little gesso board. So it's got a nice smooth surface. And I've got my little mini Masterson's Stay Wet palette. So it's one of those palettes that has the sponge underneath and the water kind of goes through the paper so the paint stays wet. I still have to kind of give it a spray because I probably didn't soak the paper enough. But anyhow, I've got out some alizarin, some black, transparent brown oxide, yellow ochre, sap green, viridian, transparent red oxide, some quinacridone red, ultramarine blue, orange, some cadmium, and some white. I also have out this little plastic, it's like, they call them a peel-off palette. You can get these at Michael's or whatever. And when I use this little mini palette, I sometimes like to have an extra mixing area. So I will, quite frequently just, have this out so I can use it to mix colors so I don't run out of space on the Stay Wet palette. So I'm looking at my reference photo, which I have in front of me. I'm just going to start off by using a little bit of this transparent red oxide and some ultramarine blue, just to kind of get a kind of just a gray for the background. And I'm gonna kind of leave out where I have my tulip. So I'm gonna kind of keep my tulip as the main subject here. So I'm just gonna kind of leave that area pretty fairly clean because I want to put that quinacridone red right on there. So you could draw it out first, and just kind of have the area marked off so you don't paint over it. And I'm just getting rid of the white background. So we're start off like that. And I'm going to go in with a wet paintbrush there and just kind of lift off some of that area. And then I'm gonna maybe put part of the other tulip here. So I'll just, using that wet brush, just kind of lift off some of that acrylic paint. And there, that just gives it, kind of cleans off the area where I'm gonna have that bright red showing up. So now I'm gonna just move to a smaller brush. And I got these brushes. I'm just trying these out. I got these Royal and Langnickel brushes with the little rubber handles. I got those from Michael's in a 5-piece set. And you can get these at Michael's. And they come in a set of 5. And they're pretty good because you got, I really like the little handles and everything. They kind of have these little rubber handles that are comfortable. So now what I'm gonna do is, I'm just gonna get some of that transparent red oxide. You can use some brown oxide, whatever you've got. And then I'm just gonna kind of sketch out, looking at my reference photo, I'm just gonna kind of sketch a few things here. A few of the petals. So we got this petal kind of comes down and then down, and then this one up here. And there's some other petal coming behind. And kind of, that's the gist of it. And then there's a little tulip over here. And some of these leaves, I'll just kind of, I'm just kind of sketching. Okay, so that's kind of the gist of it. I just used some of that transparent red oxide for that. And kind of the next thing I want to do is I'm going to work on the white area first. So I'm going to get some of that white paint and I'm going to make kind of a nice off-white color. So you can just use, you can make it a few different ways. You could use a little Viridian and that transparent red oxide. You can add a little brown oxide to it and you'll get kind of a natural kind of greeny gray color, and you can warm it up a little with some of that yellow ochre. So you get a kind of a warm kind of greeny gray color. So I'm going to go and just put some of that where I see those whites in the reference photo. I'm just going to block some of that in. And same with up in here. Might want to make it a little darker. So get just a little more of the pigment, less white. Just use the Viridian and transparent red oxide. If you want to make it a little more blue, add a little cobalt to it and just use less white. And then I'm going to go and look at my reference photo and where the whites are a little darker, I'm just going to go and put some of that in. And just kind of blocking in the whites first. So kind of have, I have this darker white, which is for these darker whites, and then these lighter whites we'll put in later. And I'm also looking at how I'm putting my brush, and put my brush down and kind of pull it that way, because that's how if you look, this is the way the tulip has these little veins that all come in and wrap down into the bottom. So they all are wrapping around and down. And you can see the fine lines where they're all coming like this, each one. So when I do my brush stroke, I'm gonna put my brush down like this and around. And I'm not putting any paint here yet because I'm gonna use that quinacridone red there. And so I'm just kind of putting in some of those whites there where I see them in the reference photo. And I could start off with the red too. That might be a little visually easier to see, but I'll do that maybe for this one. We'll see how it works. But I'm going to get some of that quinacridone red, and I'm going to put my brush at the back of that flower. I just don't want to block it, but it's kind of hard. I'll try to paint so you can see. So I've got my brush at the back, and I'm going to wrap it the way the flower goes, like that. So I'm going to go get more of that paint on my brush, and I'm going to wrap it up. And I've already kind of got some of those veins coming across there when I do that. So I'm going to just bring my brush over, and I'll zoom in so you can see that paint going up and over. And now with oil, the paints blend a lot easier, but you can get the same effect if you want to go up, and you can use the edge of your brush to kind of feather in some of those details like that. So I'm just gonna go get some more quinacridone red, and I'm gonna block this one in with the red first, and then we'll see. So I'm just using that quinacridone red. And wherever I see red, I'm just kind of putting some of that in there. And then same with here, there's red and it comes up. And just block in some of that red. And as I get near the top where it starts to kind of feather, I can use the edge of this brush to kind of give some of those marks of that tulip. And here I'm just gonna use my brush and kind of drag some of that color up and across the white there. And you can see the edges are kind of stripy from the edge of my brush. So we can use some of those later when we're doing the details. And same here, I'm gonna put my brush down and I'm gonna kind of wrap those little strokes around so that the veins are going the way they should. And get some more quinacridone red on my brush. And that one comes all the way up to here. So you can kind of give yourself an edge there. And get some of that quinacridone red there. And then this edge comes up to about here. And I'm just kind of using the edge of my brush to kind of feather those little edges. And I'm going to get a smaller brush and I'm going to go in and get some of that darker off-white color, which is, I had mixed some red oxide and Viridian, or you can add some brown oxide and Viridian, just something to get that kind of warm, dark greeny gray color. If it's too green, you just gotta add a little brown oxide to it, or red oxide, and that kind of hits it down. And then I add a little cobalt blue to it. And I'm gonna just look over here and get in some of those, wherever there's the dark gray kind of white color. And then get some more white into the mix, and you can start to add some of the kind of these shapes of all the tulip, all the tips of the edges of these petals come up here. Oh, it's not letting me expand it. There. Just kind of add some tips. So I'm looking at that and I'm just gonna kind of put in some of those marks. And then of course, this is the petal in the front here that you see there. So we'll go and add that in. And so I'm just gonna get more white into the mix. You can add a tiny bit of this, you could add some orange into it to lighten it. And I'm just gonna add the brighter white tips here. And it kind of carries down into the shadow. So I've got some darker whites there. And then I can add some of that lighter white up there. And adding just kind of some whites there to build it. Now I'm going to go back to this other tulip here, and I'm going to add some of that white that I've got here. Maybe I put too much orange in it. Just sort of not your brightest white. I added some orange and it was looking too orange, so I added a tiny speck of cobalt blue, but I'm just going to give these tips a little more shape now. And so I'm kind of going in, looking at my reference photo, and I'm just going to go and add some of these. And if I drag my brush across, it'll leave that nice edge to it. So you'll get some of those soft edges if you push down and then lift your brush off, so it's almost just being dragged, just the weight of the brush across. You'll get some of that softer edge. So now I'm gonna add some of this bright white up here. And I'm leaving a little bit of a shadow there between this petal and that petal. Leave a bit of that darker green. And I'm just kind of adding some of the highlights there. And now I'm going to get a little cobalt blue into my white mix. And down in the shadows, there's almost if you add a little cobalt to your white and a little bit of that quinacridone, you'll make kind of a purpley white. And if I look at the reference photo, this shadow down here kind of has that purple bluey white color. So I'm just putting that in now. Plus it kind of looks interesting. And in here too, there's some of that blue. You can use some ultramarine blue and the quinacridone red, and you'll get more of a deeper purpley blue color. So you can add that where it's a little darker. You can go with that too. And I see darker shadow up here. Okay. And I'm gonna look at these details a little more careful now, like where does the white come down in the middle of this? I want to kind of build that a bit. So I'm gonna go get some of that kind of white and mix it in with a little bit of that blue. So it's not the brightest bright. And I'm just gonna bring that line down to about here. And I'm using the edge of my brush just to kind of feather that line a little down. And kind of make it look more natural. So I'm bringing a few of those lines in, and that's creating that look of the veins kind of reaching up there. And we're going to put some of that in here. And then as you go, you'll start to see the shape a little better of your tulip. So put a little bit of that detail in as I go. And of course, as acrylic dries, it dries a little darker. So I want to kind of take some of this color and mix it into like the middle tones just to kind of blend it a little. So you get kind of an in-between the shadow and the light. So just kind of get something to soften that. So I'm just mixing like the white with the dark to get kind of an in-between the two. So it kind of blends up a little. And same with over here, you can kind of blend that in. And before I get into more of the detail of the tulip, I want to block in some of the green. So I'll get some of that sap green, maybe a bit of that yellow ochre. And I'm just gonna block in some of these stems. And there's a lot of different greens. There's a lot of bright greens and these kind of icy green, kind of looks more of a bluey green in some of these areas. So, you know, we'll block in some of that. Maybe for some of them, I'll block in with some, you know, some Viridian. Okay, and I forgot to put out some Cad Yellow Light, so I put out some of that because I'll need that for the greens to mix some of those real vibrant greens. I'm going to put some of that in there. Some Cad Yellow Light and sap green makes really pretty, you know, radiant kind of tulipy green. So I'm just kind of putting in some of those random tulipy. Now tulip leaves, you just kind of want to get enough of I've got some water mixed in and I've got the colors, and you kind of want to just go with it. You know, you don't want to have, so if I see a petal, I'm going to put my brush down and just kind of push down and then let go and lift off so that it gives that sort of longer brush stroke. And then kind of just take it away. And I'm going to get some of the sap, just get some of the darker green in here, some darker green here. I always get in some dark green right near the edge of the tulip so it really gives it a lot of dimension. So I always, you know, I'll get some sap green and just work that into the shadow there. And down here, just kind of working more of those greens in. And then there's that bright, coolish green. I'm going to get Viridian white and a little dab of that Cad Yellow Light, and I'm just going to bring that stroke down behind that stem there. And go with the grain of the stem. So now you've got kind of like, there's a bunch of random shapes in there. So I'm just going to get some different greens and mix up, you know, some viridian and, you know, put some different colors of green in here. You kind of have to just make some stuff up because there's lots of stuff going on in the background. I'll put some darker green there. And just kind of filling in some different greens that I see. Get some sap, the Cad Yellow Light, and you can add some edges. Up here, there's a bright edge. You can add a little white to it so that it's got that real bright look. And then up here, I'll just add an edge to it by putting my brush down. That's the sap, Cad Yellow Light, and white. And same with here, to show some light capturing the edge there. And do the same here. Just getting some different greens in there. And then I'm gonna, the background in the oil, I did black, and I think I added some, you know, some cobalt blues. So we can do that just to really make this stand out. I'm gonna get the black in there. It'll help me adjust, you know, to see the values more. It's a real, you know, stark comparison to the white. So I'm just going to get some of that in there. And just block in that background. And I might just punch in a little bit of that background in here just to give it a little more dimension there. Okay, you can fix up any of these edges with this bright green after. Remember to spritz your paint. So now everything's kind of blocked in. And I'll just go back to, let's see, this kind of middle-sized brush. It says it's a 6. And I'll get some white, and I'm going to start to really go and put some of these highlights on. Just remember, as you get close to the red, you can make sure your paint's not globby like mine. And you can work a few of those lines into the red like this using the side of your brush. So you get that nice effect of those lines going in. And then same with up here, I'm going to get a nice big highlight there. And this flower kind of comes around. And I don't want to go over my shading too much there. And then there's kind of a highlight right around there. And up here. And up there. And I'm just using the edge of my brush to kind of draw in some of that highlight there. Now you don't want to bring in all the bright white back here because this part is the underpaint, which is showing, you know, it's getting darker. And you could glaze in some of the shadow, like this is almost dry now, so we could glaze using our liquid medium or just some water. You could use some water and some little bit of that ultramarine blue and just really thin, a really thin layer, like how I've got a really watered down layer. You can glaze in some of that shadow, and right over there, you'll get some nice, kind of that bluey, glowy look without even mixing paint, just putting that glaze over. Same with down in here. And I'm just gonna put a little highlight on the edge of that stem, and then here, using some of that sap, Cad Yellow and White mixture. And then I'm gonna fix this edge here by adding a little bit more of a highlight here and there. Just added a bit of that lightness to those petals. And then you might just get some of that Quin Red on. I've got one of these little round brushes, and I'm just gonna kind of go back in and put a little edge. Some of these flowers have at the tip. Just put a little dab of that color right there. Same with up here. This one doesn't really show it, but I'm just going to use that little brush to whip some of the few little marks across the white there. And then kind of darken in near the bottom. Just now that this is dry, I can add another layer of that quinacridone red. And same with down here. Just gonna go over your edges a bit. And I can darken in some of that. There, and like that. Now there's sort of a bit of a reflected light down here, so I'm just going to get some of that cobalt blue and mix a little white into it and a little bit of the quinacridone red, so I get sort of a bluey purpley color. And I'm just going to put my brush near the bottom of this tulip, and I'm just going to pull up a little bit of that stroke to get some of that bluey, kind of that reflected light there at the bottom. And I'll do a bit of that here. Put some of that blue down there, and you can even put a bit of it. Sometimes I'll put a bit of it on the back side of the stem. Some of it in some of the petals too, just for fun. And then in the background, it's kind of, well, first I want to go back and make sure I have a little bit of that shadow color going between those two, so you can see the different. And then I'm going to just go in and put some of those cobalt blue brush strokes that I had in the original. I had a little bit of, I think, some blue. I'm just going to put some of that on there. Now, it's going to dry pretty clear, so I'm going to just use a little cobalt here and there and put some of those, kind of those cross hatches that I used in with the oil painting, just to add a bit of texture to the black. And you can take a little bit of that quinacridone red, and sometimes I'll put a little hint of that red here and there throughout the painting. So this is just a little tidbit from the tulip lesson, and just so that, you know, with acrylic, it's sometimes a little different. And I hope that this helps you out when you're going to paint your tulips. So you can go and add more detail just using your brush. You can add all the little feathery lines that you want. It takes just a little bit of work, but you can get the same effect as you do with the oil. So that's sort of the idea. You can put a few highlights on here too. I get some white and some quinacridone red together, I can go and put a few light pink highlights on there. If you add just a little white to that quinacridone red, you'll get just a few highlights. You don't want to go overboard, because then you'll lose that kind of glowy pink color. But it gives you the idea of a few of those more cooler highlights on there. And you can go in and just get a little bit of that shadow white in there and just kind of glaze some of that in there, just to get the difference between the two. Okay, so I think that's about it. Yeah, I really like the way that turned out. So I hope this helps you with your acrylic painting, and I'll talk to you soon.